Oh, hi, good evening. This is the Scrutiny Committee, and as a chair, Councillor Ish Mystery, I'm going to read out the guidance for the committee and generally for the public who are on the live stream. ITV to begin the live stream, which has just started. Welcome to Rugby Borough Council Scrutiny Committee meeting this Monday, 20th of November. I'm Councillor Ish Mystery, chair of this committee. The meeting has been web streamed to the public through the Council's YouTube channel. During the meeting, when asked to speak, please use the push to talk button on the microphone in front of you. This will allow the camera to pan on to your general direction and everyone can hear you. Before we begin the formal agenda, I'm obliged to read out the following fire notice. There is no fire drill scheduled in the building this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, then please could I ask that you make your way out of the building, down the main staircase and out of the main doors of the town hall and congregate at the entrance to the Caldecott Park. An officer of the council will guide instruction on when it's safe to return to the building. And ladies and gentlemen, moving to the agenda, the first item of business is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of September. Can I ask somebody who was present to move, please? And seconder? All those in favour? Thank you very much. Second item, we got any apologies for tonight, please?
So there's an apology from Barbara Brown, but Chair, I'd like to ask a question about the minutes. In the minutes, at item 6, I think it is, on the review of the managing arrears of council tax, it states that that item has been deferred to allow the Task and Finish group to benefit from further internal liaison with housing services. But when you look at the work programme, that item is not on the work programme anymore, and I just don't want it to drop off.
I think this was raised last time, wasn't it? Can't remember. No? Lynn, can we put it back on again to remind after?
It doesn't come off the work programme, it's just there was no update to the report this time. It's still there sitting in your table.
It's not in the table.
Is it still live?
Yes.
Sorry, back to the Chair, we've done the apologies. Sorry, Manny. Can I just, before I start, introduce Manny Catley, who's substituting for Aftab today as the Chief Officer, if that sounds good. And we got Lynn on here, and we got some of the officers just introduced. We got Michelle Dixon from Housing, Claire Preston from, we've got a big title, Operation and Traded Service, and Caroline Merritt Watson, who is the portfolio holder, Mike Connell, Tim Wallace, who is the village, who is the portfolio, Derek Paul, the leader, who is the portfolio of the regulation, and then we got Henry Binnington sitting at the back as well. So, right, declaration of interest, item 3, to receive the declaration of the non-pecuniary interest as defined by the Council Code of Conduct for the councillors. Anybody? Councillor Lawrence.
Concerning the digital inclusion, I'm a member of the Institute of Engineers and Technicians, who are the co-founders and sponsors of the Digital Poverty Alliance.
Okay, Councillor Lawrence, I think that's noted. Second one is peculiar B, which is peculiar interest as defined by the Council Code of Conduct for councillors. No. And the third, finally, God forbid, notice under Section 106, Local Government Finance Act 1982, non-payment of community charge or council tax. Okay, right. Item 4, we get an officer and obviously portfolio holder as well to answer the questions. And today we're going to look at the the Operation and Trade Service Portfolio Holder on the topic of property repairs and the way the system works. You know, you got Michelle Dixon here from housing who will fill in some of how the process starts, and it just handed over to property services. And the biggest thing that came out in the KPI was the void. I think that's what we discussed with the deputy chair ourselves and the officer. So Claire was present as well at the time. So Claire, if you just give a bit of an outline how we deal with the void property, whether the small one, the long ones, and the cost implication of that. And then we can ask Michelle Dixon just how it joins up with the housing part of it, and then I'll open it up for questions. Yeah? Okay? Thank you. I did. Must have gone. Oh.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the void process, when a resident returns their keys, they give that to our allocations team, who then pass that on to the property repairs team. We have a process map that isn't complete yet. It hasn't got the whole process on, but that is basically a surveyor will go to the property, they will have a look at what is needed there, and at that point it will be decided whether it's a minor, a standard or a major void. Would you like some examples of what they are? Yeah. So a major void could be a whole garden that needs sorting out, so it may become overgrown. We've had one recently that had a large pool in the garden that we had to fill. Sometimes we need to replace kitchens and bathrooms. Sometimes there's woodworm, so they have to be ripped out. So it's basically anything that's going to take quite a long time and a lot of man hours or to repair. They're coming in at a higher rate than is what would normally be expected. The average is about 15% of voids that are returned are a major void, but we're around 50% at the moment. Standard voids, that might just be a kitchen that needs replacing or a bathroom, but not everything. And then the minors could just be a lock change or a little bit of work in the garden. So that's the difference between all the different voids. So once they've been completed, they're handed back to the allocations team, who allocate them according to the allocations policy to the people on the waiting list.
We're going to ask the question at the end. So can I just ask Michelle Dixon how that fits in? And I know you got a couple of other things which is not relevant, but I think questions were raised at the chair's meeting just for information. So while she's here, we can pick up on the housing allocation, etc. Yeah. So Michelle, all yours.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate, really, that there's a contractor-client relationship between my service and Claire's service, if you like, in terms of I've got the demand and Claire's got the labour in terms of turning these properties round. So what happens is, in an ideal world, we'll get 4 weeks' notice from our tenant that it's their intention to terminate their tenancy and hand that property back to us. If we're aware of that, then obviously there's upfront work that we can do to manage expectations in terms of getting into the property, to validate the condition of that property, to give the tenant the heads up as if you hand your keys back with those issues outstanding, you can expect to be recharged for X, Y and Z. Alternatively, get it put right in the meantime. That isn't the situation with a lot of our voids. Recently, we've had an unprecedented number of voids that have come through as a result of death. And obviously, the process has to change somewhat to accommodate that. You'll also be aware that recently we took a report to Council asking for some additional resource for the Housing Services team, because we want to do property inspections once a year. go in, visit the properties, so that we can actually do some more due diligence, if you like, around the condition of our stock, so that eventually the process should be that we can expect an improvement in the condition of stock when it is returned to us by the outgoing tenant. In addition to that, you'll notice that on the agenda for council in December, stock condition surveys, where we're going to be doing, subject to your approval, a programme of stock condition surveys. Now, in addition to that upfront work that we do with the tenant base, circumstances permitting, we do have other situations where people just abscond from properties, and again, we can't legislate for that. We tend to know the families that are struggling with maintaining their tenancies, and we keep closer contact with those. But yes, unfortunately, on occasion, people do abscond from the property. In addition, we have a situation sometimes where people will willfully damage the property if they know that they've come to the end of the line in terms of an upcoming eviction, and they will do that. But also recently, we've had some cases where there's been mental health issues with people that are living in our properties. And again, this has resulted in damage to the properties. And it's not about finger pointing or blame. These people, they need support, and we get support in from the right agencies. But just to give you an example, we had a situation where somebody systematically took a hammer to every single wall in their property. We've also had somebody do a bit of DIY removal of a complete staircase from a property. So that just gives you an idea of some of the issues that we do face as a landlord. From the point of view of giving you some reassurance around the working relationship between ourselves in housing and Claire's team and the wider team in respect of voids, is that there's regular meetings on a weekly or a fortnightly basis between the housing service manager and the repairs manager, so that we can forecast what's coming in, the state of play, but also where we understand the priorities in terms of who's on our waiting list and where people might be in crisis that need a property to be turned over a little bit quicker than another one. In addition to that, we also have a situation where we have our KPI monitoring. As you're aware, we do the KPI monitoring a lot more closely now as we move towards being information and performance driven. And as part of that, we have regular sessions where we get together as a housing service and a repairs service, and that is supported by myself and with Claire, and we go through and we analyse what the KPI data is telling us, so we can identify interventions from there. Another issue is that in the last 5 years, we've had an abundance of new housing supply come through, new affordable housing supply, mainly off the back of Section 106 delivery. As a result of that, I'm going to be honest with you, we've had a bit of a bonanza in terms of affordable housing. In the last 5 years, we've had 1,200 new homes come through. That's delivered by the RPs, 100 and odd of those have been delivered by ourselves, Rugby Borough Council. What that has done is it's actually reduced some of the demand on our waiting list for now. And I say for now because we roughly receive 100 new applications for our housing every month. As a consequence, our waiting list numbers have come down a bit, which means that sometimes people, because they've got the right to a couple of offers of accommodation, they may not accept their first offer of accommodation that we give them, and then we have to make, and it's prescribed in case law, reasonable offers of subsequent accommodation, and some of you will be familiar with that. So it's not always a case of, oh great, we've got these properties that have come through, and they will be matched to the people that are actually on the waiting list. It's very much bespoke what people's housing circumstances are and what can be defined as a reasonable offer. That will actually compound, sorry, the sound quality on here is a bit dodgy. So I've lost my train of thought, thank you. So what we do is we have a situation where what conveniently comes through as a void property might not actually meet the needs of applicants on the waiting list. Now, What we're doing at the moment is we're doing a review of our allocations policy as well to make sure that we're satisfied that people are able to get access onto the waiting list in a timely manner. What we've also been mindful of is that as the registered providers who traditionally do the lion's share of new affordable homes in the borough, a lot of those are going to be retracting from delivering new affordable homes as they focus on the condition of their properties. You'll have noticed from the housing press, you'll have noticed from local government press that a lot of organisations are retracting and focusing on uplifting the investment in their existing stock as opposed to providing new stock. The impact of that will be that in the near future we can probably anticipate that there'll be a drop-off in terms of new completions by the registered providers as they commit to that, bringing up the stock to standard. So what we'll probably find is that we've had this bonanza situation with our waiting list at the moment, but actually as demand starts to creep up again, exceeding the available supply, those waiting list numbers will go up. Forgive me for giving you such a detailed explanation, but I don't think that you could perhaps look at the issue of void turnaround times without considering the other bit, which is the demand for those properties. We do have some properties which are harder to let, particularly older people's accommodation, where people don't necessarily aspire to one-bedroom first-floor flats. For a while, we've been looking at redesignation opportunities for some of those properties. Obviously, we have to take a very sensitive view as to how we approach that. And again, we've got plans to come back to members in the coming months with some proposals as to what that would look like going forward. So for me, really, in summary, I just want to provide you that reassurance that there is a strategic overview of all these different moving parts that's going on, but also there's that close liaison between the two service areas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michelle, and also Claire. Can I just open up for debate and trying to concentrate on, the void properties and property service? Councillor Mackenzie.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Chair. I've got lots of questions. I'm really sorry. I've been jotting notes and I've been thinking about it over a little while. Actually, kind of where to begin. Can we start by just understanding exactly how many voids, how many houses we have that are voids where the work has been done? How many we have that are voids where the work is either waiting to be done or in progress? How long a property once completed is likely to stay as a void before it gets filled, and if there are particular characteristics of houses that are harder to fill. You've mentioned one, but could you please elaborate on all of that, please?
Yeah, so at the moment there's 47 voids on the list. This is with regards to property repairs, part of the list only. 26 of those are classed as major voids, so that's 55%. 10 of those are with an external contractor that we've been using to help return these major voids sooner, because we only have a team of 5 people that actually do our voids at the moment. We've got some potential voids come in, so there's 18 potentials that we're still waiting for keys to be returned. So, yeah, but we haven't received the keys for those yet. And there's we returned 17 last week, and we've received 6 new ones this week. So we're actually returning more than we're receiving.
Okay, essentially, I've already touched on the older people's housing, particularly if it's one bedroom first floor. But we also have an issue sometimes with our rural vacancies. And the reason for that is a lot of applicants on the waiting list, their income levels are such that being able to use transport and have car ownership to be able to get out to some of those properties, it's just not, it's out of their league, if you like. So there's this issue about people that potentially would really benefit from those homes that potentially are excluded from the waiting list because of some of the barriers that are there at the moment. Now that's for a good reason, but as I say, we're looking at the waiting list at the moment, the allocations policy, to see how we can address that balance. And as I say, I'll give you an example. If you think about some of our vacancies, you know, you can be out as far as Flecknoe, which is near the Daventry border. There aren't any shops. It's all the things that go around, not just giving somebody a set of keys with no transport. It's all the other things to sustain that home. So that is another area. Rural vacancies can be challenging. A lot of people aspire to the town centre. We're dealing with the most vulnerable clients. Often they have medical needs, they have mental health issues, they have regular prescribed medication, and they need support services, a lot of which is concentrated in the urban environment. So there is this split between rural and urban at the moment. However, I'm confident then when we look at the allocations policy that is something that we can overcome.
Thank you. Can I just finish back the question? How many properties do you have, Michelle, under your side that are in voids at the moment?
I've got to apologise. I haven't come equipped with that information this evening, but I'll gladly get it for you.
Okay, thank you. And if you could after, that would be great. And the allocations policy, now everybody knows I'm a new councillor, started in May, but I've been hearing about the allocations policy from May till now. It's now nearly the end of November. What is the time frame for the allocations policy to be reviewed and brought to council, please?
Right, I can give you reassurances that that piece of work has been sent out to an external specialist to cast their eye over, because it's not just a case of looking at how we allocate properties. We've got to give due consideration to the legislation that sits behind that. For example, stuff around the Children Act, we've got the Homelessness Reduction Act, so it's a very complex piece of work, and that's why it's been procured and gone through a specialist for that. The initial draft of that allocations policy is with us. It's got to land on my desk yet. I'd be hoping that in the early part of 2024 I'd be in a position to take something to council for consideration, but obviously I'd want to do some consultation, not just with elected members but also with other stakeholders as well.
Thank you, Michelle. Anybody would like to ask a question? Councillor Parker.
Thank you, and just to put on record my thanks to the department who sorted a very difficult issue in our social sheltered housing in Bilton, with a particularly difficult client who had caused considerable damage to the property and to the well-being of those who lived around him. Thankfully that client was evicted and has a more appropriate home provided by the people of Rugby, and I want to put on my record my thanks for your support on that issue. So it's no doubt that I feel very passionately that properties for older people should be very carefully considered before they are reallocated to general list, and I look forward to seeing any potential changes when and if those come before us. So enough speaking and speech making. I've got a couple of questions about recharging. One from an example that a very well respected councillor in the chamber, who I won't name, helped a client move from one council property to another with significant damage that had been sustained in the course of that tenancy, and was then moved to a better property. But the question she asked was, who's paying for this damage? You know, is it you? Is it the taxpayer? Because, you know, you've left it in a terrible state. And I think we have the obligation here in council to ask that question about when tenants move on and have caused damage that is outside normal wear and tear. I'm not sitting here to say that in a long tenancy you're not going to need replacements for things when a new tenant comes in. But what concerns me is willful damage of our property that is owned by the taxpayer of this borough. And are we satisfied that we are doing everything to recover the costs? So that's my first question. And how do we measure that, and what is our rate of recharge?
Thank you. I don't know, Michelle, you want to pick it up?
I'm not getting on with this microphone, sorry, Chair. Thank you for that. Yeah, I take on board exactly what you're saying, Councillor Parker, in terms of looking at willful damage to properties, a lot different to standard wear and tear. The costs, there's two issues that I'd like to draw to your attention. Is because of the ring fencing of the HRA, it's not a liability that falls on the wider tax base. It's something that hits the HRA. I understand what you're saying. HRA tenants are also taxpayers, but I'm just going to get that into the equation, the ring fence there. In terms of willful damage, we will do recharges to people. We will try and recover the cost of the damage to the properties, because you're quite right. Nobody else can walk away from that responsibility. So why should our tenants? Unfortunately, our ability to recover those charges is significantly hampered by the fact that many of our tenants just haven't got any money. So just to give you some reassurance that will be charged as a sundry debt that will go through the creditors team, the debtors team, sorry. I've forgotten his surname, Richard Moore's side of things. So we will attempt to recover that. What I will be honest with you about is that I need to get a better idea as to what our recovery rate is in terms of what we're recharging and actually what we're accruing back.
Thank you very much. Is that correct?
Thank you. I think for me, it's the idea that someone can trash their property and then be moved to a beautiful new property and nothing is done. That's not just fair, it's willfully unfair on the many and majority of tenants who take pride in their social housing. And, you know, I don't want to focus on that small minority, but I do think that we need to really be aware that A, it's happening, and B, somebody's picking up the bill.
If I can just give some reassurance on that, Councillor, we're certainly not in the habit of rewarding people for bad conduct about their tenancies. But as we look at everything on an individual case, we have to look at the risk management side. And it may be that somebody's got wider vulnerabilities that could actually, if we didn't move them on, it might actually be that it costs the taxpayer indirectly more money. But just to reassure that we just don't ad hoc do an allocation on that basis, that we look at all the risk management and stuff that goes around that. And just to reiterate what you've said, it's in the absolute minority of cases. And I'd be the first to say we're not here to reward bad tenancy conduct.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Can I ask Councillor Raven and then Councillor New and then Councillor Mackenzie?
Thank you, Chair. Just one concern of mine and a question, if I may. And do we not, I'm assuming the answer to this is no, and if so, why, don't we ask for guarantors, for instance, when a tenant arrives in a property? At least then, there's probably a more successful way of actually recovering any willful damage, and there's probably less likelihood of that happening in the first place.
Thank you. First of all, I'm not actually aware that we can do rent guarantees in social rented housing. What we can do is we can do rent in advance, but that is rent in advance. What the trick is, if you like, is to go back to good old-fashioned housing management, where we've got that contractual relationship between the tenant and the landlord. I'm very much a believer that that needs to be a very clear relationship, and it goes back to the issue that we took to council only a few weeks ago, that I want people in and out of those properties. I want people out on the estates. If they see that a garden's overgrown, then they take the initiative to knock on the door to see what the internal condition of that property is. I'll be honest with you, in terms of recovering costs and putting things right, once a tenant has handed the keys in, the likelihood of us being able to recover such costs diminishes quite substantially. The trick is that we need to be in and out more while that property is tenanted. And as I say, there is nothing wrong with having that healthy relationship to remind people that they are our tenants and we expect them to behave in a certain way and offer due respect to that property that they've been allocated.
Thank you, Michelle. Can we just keep mindful of the time as well? We've got a lot of officers and councillors who are going to give us bit. Can you just ask the questions which are not individual in a case, but more general policy that we have in this chamber, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask how long it takes for people in temporary accommodation to move to main duty? And are they allowed to move into main duty if they have rent arrears?
Okay, the situation will depend on the individual circumstances. We have an obligation, if we've had a duty to offer somebody temporary accommodation, we've got to make sure that we investigate the housing circumstances so that we can come to a robust decision, a safe decision in terms of the duty that we owe them permanently. Now, what that could look like is it could look like an offer of social housing. It could look like us using the private rented sector as a conduit for meeting that housing need. And I would reiterate that the private rented sector is an option. We look at a holistic housing option approach. It is in nobody's interest to have people in temporary accommodation for any longer than is absolutely necessary. And that is compounded when we're talking about families. People need a stable home environment, not least so that children can take up school places, get to school, and their parents don't have the pressure of trying to get them from one end of the town to the other, which goes back to the point I made earlier on about reasonable offers of accommodation. I'm pleased to say at the moment our temporary accommodation is looking really quite healthy. We have got some private sector leased schemes where single people are resident in, but actually in terms of the most urgent accommodation, bed and breakfast, last resort, at the beginning of this month we were down to one household being in bed and breakfast accommodation. One of the things that I'm most proud of in the last year and a half is the Housing Advice and Benefits team really taking the bull by the horns and actually looking at the housing options approach rather than the default assumption of social housing. And as a result, our own stock, we had about 125 HRA properties that we were using as temporary accommodation. We've actually turned that on its head now, where people are now, we're actually using the HRA stock as HRA stock and not having to use it as a fallback for temporary accommodation, which is a legitimate function if we're clear about it on the accounting. So it just gives you an example, again, some more reassurance that how we're limiting that unpleasant journey in temporary accommodation for people.
Michelle, Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you. This is a question for Claire, going back to the original thing about the topic of property repairs. Two questions. First is, do you benchmark your labour rates with external labour rates? And the second is, do you benchmark the work rates, so how quickly repairs are done with external workers? So how quickly does your team of 5 actually process jobs if you compared them to the external market, please?
Thank you. Yes, we do benchmark the labour rates. We have to because we do struggle to recruit, and some of the trades are really, really difficult. Like we currently don't have a roofer, so we have to use external contractors to do that because we just can't get people. I'm not so sure about if we benchmark the work rates, but I can find out and I can come back to you with that.
Okay, thank you very much. Have we exhausted all the questions? Okay, thank you. Just quickly, one point from the chair, and all this has got an implication. I think we discussed at the rent setting that there is a limited budget that we have, and the kind of average void used to be, say, maybe 16, less than 20. When you're looking at 46, and some are pretty heavy. So just got to look at it. That we need to address this issue of void. There are many, many reasons Michelle has quite eloquently put through. So let's address it going forward. There's no one thing that fixes the reason why we have all these issues. Yeah. So anyway, thank you very much. Michelle, Claire, and Callum, if you want to stay, you're welcome to, or you can be excused if you want to. Okay, thank you for that report. Quite interesting, and I hope we learned something there today. And let's, as a councillor, trying to understand what the officers are up against and trying to address. And I think one thing that didn't come out, I think we picked up at the chairs meeting, is to put a flow chart, how we go through steps. Michelle, if you talk to Claire, come to you, goes here, and how we end up with the outcome, if that makes sense, for the new councillors, yeah?
Yes, we'll get the process map done for you, yeah.
Thank you very much. All right. Item 5, this was notice of motion that was brought up, digital exclusion motion, which was quite, I don't know whether I want to read it. Are you aware of what the motion was? Okay. So what we do, we've got Councillor Tim Village and also Mike Connell, the officers. And what I would like to do is, what we should be considered, that there's a lot of question on a one-page strategy, and there are various policy strategy that's in place, corporate, blueprint, equality objective, etc. And then what we knew, I think on the original notice of motion, it's suggested by end of December. I don't think, looking at the report, officer believe it'll take at least 3 months, so we need to review this deadline of December. That's not going to happen, and that is where we are, and then what will be the outcome. So what I would do, I will ask Mike or Tim, if between two of you would like to pick up, and then we'll ask the questions, yeah? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And may I thank you for your summary of the last item as portfolio holder for communities and homes. Thank you for taking the matter seriously. I think please note that the leader coming along this evening as well, we take the matter seriously and are working closely with the chief officers to deliver the best outcomes for our residents. Moving on then to this item, and I think in a week where we've seen our new website go live, it's quite timely. I think Chair summarised, the report and the motion going forward. I would point out that on the night when Councillor Edwards tabled the motion, I did offer to meet with Councillor Edwards and indeed with Mike Connell. That meeting has taken place. We had a wholly productive, collaborative meeting, and I think building on that, the one page builds on that. Really, all I want to say this evening is picking up on through the motion where we need to get to through the task and finish group. Again, Chair, you've pointed out that we may have been a little bit ambitious with our timeline, but you do have a one-page strategy, which I'm certainly not going to steal the Chief Officer's thunder in terms of talking through. So without further ado, if I may, Chair, I'll pass to Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Willis. Thank you, Chair. So I thought I'd give a brief rundown of the one-page strategy that's been put forward for consideration, see whether it's appropriate to deliver what the notes of motion suggested. Starting off with the broad topic area in the one-page strategy, which is to ensure that no digital discrimination is taking place across all the services provided to the residents and businesses of Rugby by Rugby Borough Council. I take particular pride in this, ensuring that digital exclusion is as low as possible within Rugby Borough Council. I have a background in private sector and schools that included clients with additional requirements. So I've ensured that our customer access strategy, our IT and DS strategy have always included that viewpoint of ensuring that our residents and businesses can access things in a non-digital way. So with that in mind, the one-page strategy puts forward 4 parameters to be considered, which I'll briefly talk about. One is the consideration of digital exclusion being robust enough within the council to ensure that all services are looking at digital exclusion as a possibility, and ensuring that there are measures, mitigations in place to ensure that that doesn't unreasonably exist. The second consideration, the second and third consideration, in fairness, relate to 2 different groups of which the same outcome would be, which is ensuring that our services aren't unreasonably restricted by either digital poverty or those residents and businesses who choose not to access through a digital entry point for whatever reason. And we recognise absolutely that there are residents and businesses out there who choose not to access through a digital entry point, and it is their choice to do that. And then the fourth item to be considered is that actually are there services provided to the residents and businesses of Rugby where access through non-digital means could be improved to increase engagement to those services. I won't talk about the strategic considerations. I've already talked about them briefly, but it's also within our corporate strategy as well, of course. I've suggested inside the one-page strategy that actually we have some papers we could use to consult and some partners' information, which has already been referred to previously, actually, by Councillor Lawrence. We have the Digital Poverty Alliance and the Good Things Foundation, who provide excellent information to support looking at digital exclusion and ensuring it doesn't exist. And we also have the Digital Exclusion and Cost of Living Report, which was commissioned through the House of Lords Communication and Digital Committee, which we can use for reference as well, and I would suggest that that is done so. What I have noted as well is that actually the government digital exclusion strategy is from 2014, and I actually don't think it is appropriate to refer to due to the time frame, should it be considered. And then finally, for consultation is, of course, officers within Rugby Borough Council who are enacting these strategies and policies to try and reduce digital exclusion. As you've already referred to, Chair, thank you very much for that. I think for this to be a robust task and finish group and for all of the findings to be actioned, I think it's going to take about 12 weeks to do so. There may be some shortening of that, but I think with resources and the amount of scrutiny that needs to be done to provide reassurance to the committee, then I think 12 weeks is a good time frame. So finally, the actions that I've suggested inside the one-page strategy is for the task and finish group to gather reassurances through appropriate officers on how digital exclusion is considered within their public-facing service requests. The task and finish group to actually select a small variety of services to review to provide their own reassurances as well. The task and finish group, alongside partners or partner information, which I've already said, to review the availability and accessibility of service requests, which has improved recently, as just said by Councillor Tim Willis, with the introduction of our new website aligning to GDSV4, which is the government design standards for accessibility. We're always looking to improve things both digitally and non-digitally. The fourth action being the task and finish group to review the help and schemes in place to reduce digital poverty for the residents and businesses in Rugby. My colleague Michelle and I worked on the cost of living actions from last year, which included reducing digital poverty within that as well. And then finally, the task and finish group to provide a final report and maybe suggested actions from that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Officer, and also Councillor Tim Willis. Can I open up for debate? And if you've got any question that they can answer before we adopt the one-page strategy. Councillor Livesey.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think this needs some refinement. I think some of the language in it is a bit tricky. We have to bear in mind that there are people in Rugby who will have had to stop paying for their broadband because they can't afford it anymore. So to use the words choosing not to access services through digital entry point is a bit moot at the very least. I'd like to see more consultation with stakeholders. So registered social landlords, I know because I've run contracts for them on digital exclusion in the past, do work around this area for their tenants, and they would be good to talk to. So would suppliers like City Fibre, who have corporate social responsibility and will do things like provide tablets and free training, if we can negotiate that. I think we also need to know where the connectivity is poor. It's probably going to be poorer in our rural areas than in our town centre. And what else have I got here? The use of the word reassurance kind of bothers me because it sort of sounds like it's already all okay, but we just need to be told. I think what we need to do is investigate rather than look for reassurances. And I'd also like to see some comprehensive data coming out of this about digital exclusion in Rugby, some proper numbers, and so that we can really sort of see what needs to be done, see where our residents are struggling to access services. So that's my comments.
We'll take on board some of the comments, I think, and it becomes, Mike, we can pick it up on the one-page strategy with Aftab. Councillor Mackenzie.
So I think for me what's missing is the fact that digital exclusion can be a bit of a sliding scale, having gone through dealing with elderly parents. They were fine at doing things, they get less fine at doing things, and then they really can't do things. And the digital exclusion kind of creeps up on them. And I think with an ageing population, that's actually, and because we actually have lots of retirement schemes here in Rugby, so we do have quite an older population in some pockets in particular, I'd like to see something in the digital exclusion around how that affects our residents as they get older, and how they can access our services, because they will have compound issues of comprehension, technology, and potentially things like hearing, which also affects whether they can access the phone lines and understand what's going on, and so they become excluded on so many levels, and they may also lose their mobility to be able to walk in through the door. So they become society excluded. It's a function of ageing where they haven't got the support. But having lived through some of this stuff, I'd like to see it within that, because I think it's actually an area where people become digitally excluded over time when they wouldn't have been beforehand.
Okay, can I just say, they're all valid points, and the idea of having the task and finish group is to tease out all those deficiency and issues that arises with people who are excluded. And I agree with you, it could be language, all sorts of things. I don't think we're going to resolve that tonight, but Mike and Tim, if you can just take on board, and then we'll pick it up with whoever the task members are. Anybody would like to add anything? Councillors?
Just a very quick one. What sort of contingency plan do we have if the worst to happen and we had a cyber attack and everything fell down?
Thank you, Councillor. It's not necessarily related to digital exclusion directly, but I can see how you've related them. So we have a variety of business continuity plans, which includes a cyber attack or bringing down of either power or data, whether that be locally or nationally. And in fact, I attended the WLRF exercise about 2 months ago for that very reason, in fact, and fed that back to my colleague David Burrows, and his team are doing business continuity plans, which includes cyber resilience. And I've also today, by coincidence, I'm attending the next WLRF cyber resilience. So we do have backup plans written, processes, and it would be a tough time, but we do have ways and means to ensure that should there be a complete pull down of our digital services, we know the timelines, milestones, priorities for bringing digital services back up again, and the way to get the services provided to our residents. So hopefully that gives you a lot of reassurance.
Okay, are we okay with everything so far? Yeah, thanks to all the members who contributed, and Mike and Tim, take on board what we just said earlier. I think tonight is just to adopt that we go forward with the task and finish group, and we delegate the responsibility to, after to progress with this one-page strategy. Lynn, okay with that? All right. Are we all in favour? Okay. Thank you very much. It off. Next item is community safety motion. That was brought. Oh, you're welcome to go. Michelle, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Right, the next item, I think, Heather, you put it through, didn't you? Notice a motion for the crime, the knife. Who was it? Councillor Sanderson again. Okay, I'm losing my track today. All right. We got the leader of the council, who is also the regulation and safety portfolio holder, and also we got Henry Biddington, who chairs with the leader, is his lead officer on the community partnership. So I don't know whether Henry, I did ask this question when the chief superintendent was here, Rankin, asking the stats, what exactly were the knife crime, knife crime, I should say, related to Rugby in relation to wider Warwickshire. And the other question was in terms of that recently we just launched I think it's 13th of February, November, the amnesty. So I'm not sure, Derek, you want to let Henry give a feel where we are with it, and whether we progress, or are we just cross-purposely messing up with your, the partnership, which is already doing a good job?
No, I'm more than happy for Mr. Biddington to carry on. I've got some details that I can forward on after Henry's spoken, Chairman.
Okay, Henry, if you would like to, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I did submit a report with for the motion in relation to what action is being taken from the Community Safety Partnership in relation to knife crime across the borough. As you can see, the Community Safety Partnership is just that partnership of various partners, including, well, because you was at the last Scrutiny Committee report where we talked about the Community Safety Partnership, but police and other agencies, including Rugby Borough Council. Strategic assessment for our priorities was done in 21-22, and it identified that young people linked with knife crime was becoming an issue, and was therefore developed as a priority for the CSP to concentrate on. It's one of 5 priorities which the Community Safety Partnership identifies. Currently, we have a number of actions around how we're tackling knife crime, particularly with young people, how to prevent it. That's in the report. So at the moment there's a serious violence. So I'll just take a step back, sorry. So at the moment there's another duty which has come into place called the serious violence duty, which is a duty put on all all authorities named in that duty, as Rugby Borough Council are one of them, to ensure that they share information and provide action plans in tackling serious violence. And we are working with our colleagues across the partnership to ensure that that duty is met through the CSP, and some of the funding which is coming through the serious violence plan will be fed into what work's being done around rugby. So a couple of the work streams as Warwickshire County Council have done doing a school intervention programme called the Identity Programme, which mentors young people, will go into all of the schools across Warwickshire, including the schools in Rugby, and offer mentoring, offer coaching, offer sort of how for young people to avoid serious violence, and obviously serious violence includes use of knife crime. We'll have our own rugby-based intervention around knife crime, which is we'll be looking at linking in with sports clubs. We're looking at young people providing of some artwork to have a sort of campaign specifically to rugby. And then last week we had OpScepter, which is a week of knife crime awareness, which is run by the Warwickshire Police, but we also support that as one of our key partners within the Community Safety Partnership. And that work, so they had a knife amnesty at the police station, that was promoted through our comms, and so they did various other things as well, so it wasn't just an amnesty. So they've been going into schools, they've been talking to local businesses. There was some work done with trading standards around selling of knives and test purchases. They've done some sweeps of Caldecott Park and various other parks across the borough. I haven't got any up-to-date data from last week because I only spoke to the neighbourhood sergeant this morning and he said they're collating the data at the moment, but I'm happy to provide how many knives were given in, etc., around that amnesty. And that operation through the partnership and through Warwickshire Police occurs twice a year, so we'll have another one again in sort of middle of sort of summertime next year. So about every 6 months we run the knife amnesty and we run the operation for OpScepter. But that's just a touch on some of the work we're doing around knife crime, serious violence, etc. through the CSP. So I'm kind of comfortable that I'd like to think that the Community Safety Partnership has already taken action in relation to the motion that was passed.
Thank you, Henry. Councillor Paul, you would wish to add anything to that?
Thank you, Chairman. All I'd like to add is that every month I get the crime figures for the whole of Warwickshire and the counties, and the districts and boroughs, and I send them to the leader of the Labour group, leader of the Lib Dem group. Whether they disseminate that down to their councillors, I don't know. But all the crime figures, excuse me, I've got a bad cough. All the figures, the knife crime figures, everything are on that list. All I can say to you is for October, Rugby was joint lowest, second lowest for knife crime with a pointed instrument or a knife. There was 33, and 7 of those, or it was 40 altogether. 7 of those suspects were under 18 years of age. The lowest was North Warwick's. Bearing in mind they've only got 62,000 residents, we've got 114,000. Believe it or not, South Warwickshire was the highest with 117 knife crimes or pointed weapons. So, yes, as Mr Biddington has stated, we are on it. I keep him on his toes, and I thank him for the work he does. That's all I've got to say, Chairman.
Thank you. A couple of questions on where we go with this. Listening to Mr. Biddington regarding the work they're already doing it, and been assured by the Councillor Poole as well. Now, my concern is that do we want to duplicate all the work that's going on? And then also in the report that, I don't know, Henry, whether you picked it up, that most of the knife, I wouldn't call it crime issue, is probably at domestic level, at home, and it's not out in the street. The perception is just to be on the mindful. So, thing is, can I take on the question and then ask Mr. Biddington, are we duplicating anything that we're doing already, or do we want to progress with a one-page strategy? Councillor Parker.
I think we're duplicating, and I think there's a real danger here that, although well-intentioned, the motion really fails to address a problem, because the problem is already being addressed. And, you know, while I respect any councillor's right to bring any motion to council, you know, on this occasion, I think that we have ample evidence that, you know, what is being asked for by the councillors is already being addressed. And, you know, that is why we have a community safety partnership. And while it is abhorrent, the idea of young people being involved in knife crime, the figures speak for themselves, and as in every situation, your risk is highest in your own home, not on the streets of Rugby. And I think it's very important that councillors always remember that facts are there and they can be accessed. And it's a bitter shame that the good intentions of our leader to share the information that he has across council is clearly has hit a barrier in some way, and I think that that's a real shame. But I don't know how other councillors feel, but it is our job to scrutinise, and in this case, you know, we have a report and it is useful. I suggest we move on.
Just add something, maybe since the notice of motion was put forward, a couple of events have overtaken, like the amnesty, etc. So I'm just wondering, do we really, it will be the same officers doing the work, yeah? So rather we take that report that community partnership gives and address it via that platform, then rather than have a strategy and spend your time. I don't know what's your view of the rest of the members are. Councillor Dew and Councillor Livesey.
So I just wanted to say that I think what would really help with this report is if it actually contained what the intended outcomes are for this work, because it doesn't actually state what they are, and also what the KPIs or targets are around how many settings will be attended where young people will be spoken to or involved in activities, how many young people are going to be, you know, what is the target for how many young people will be spoken to, that kind of thing, because then we could really see what the purpose of this work is, because at the moment we've just got some headlines and some general description, and even one of the target dates just says 2024. Is that the 1st of January or the 31st of December? So, you know, a little bit more detail I think would really help here.
Henry, do you want to come back before Councillor New? Can you add what you want to, and then they can pick it up together, please?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add that basically the only evidence we've got is on knife crime is the ones that are actually reported. There's probably a lot that goes unreported. There are a lot of threatening behaviours with knife crime that probably don't get reported because of fear of retaliation. Also, the age range that are targeted at the moment are secondary, and there is evidence saying that there are some young children carrying knives at the age of 9. So we do need to look at possibly bringing that education and awareness into probably some of the primary schools, possibly the Year 6 children, leavers, that sort of thing, so that they're aware. There's also links with things like county lines where children are involved in things like that as well, very young children, and they would probably be carrying knives. So again, a lot is unreported. We have to be careful a lot falls through the net and isn't noticed, and we need to be aware that a lot of young people are probably carrying knives and it's not being noticed and unknown to the families. Thank you, Chair.
Taking on board some of the comments, man. Councillor Timms.
The serious violence intervention programme that's going to happen during 2024, which is the date that Councillor Livesey, it's actually a Warwickshire County Council responsibility, and I'm here, I better declare, you know, I am a Warwickshire County Councillor, so I'm fully aware of it. I do think if you've got questions about data, then that can be addressed via another method rather than duplicating that, whether it's a one-page report to the Scrutiny Committee or whatever. It can be done in that way. But I have to say, What we're not, the actual notice of motion talked about the carrying of knives on our streets and in our open spaces. And what we've heard tonight is that knife crime predominantly happens in the home. And that's, therefore, I think that sort of makes the notice of motion itself invalid, because we are hearing completely different evidence to what the notice of motion was put to address. So I do think that if we want more data, that's fine, and we can ask for that in a one-page report. But I do think otherwise we are duplicating what the Community Safety Partnership are quite ably doing, and we are able to have them come to us and report. So that is fine for me.
I don't want to put it on the back burner or anything, take it seriously. This is a serious issue, and all I'm saying is that knowing what Henry and his team are doing with, community partnership with Derek as well representing us, would you suggest that some of the things that be done can be taken on board as part of your partnership and then get a feedback which we need to close that loop through the leadership, yeah?
Yes, certainly, Chairman. I think that the question of openness and knives in the open stems from the open day we had with Councillor Sanderson up in St Andrew's Gardens, where the wardens were working with the litter pickers, and they found 3 knives in the bushes. And I think this is maybe where the knife and the motion comes from. Yes, there are knives out there, but I will take that forward. Now, I will seek permission, if I can, from Warwickshire. I will disseminate the crime figures for the whole of the county to the councillors if they want it, but I don't know if I can do that. But I will ask.
That sounds like a good idea, Councillor Poole, yeah. Do we want to proceed with this, or shall we say to the community partnership that they go ahead and then keep us in the loop? Would that be appropriate? And I don't want to completely wash out and say we ignore it. I don't think that should be the case, and we do take it seriously. My word was duplication. Do we want to duplicate the work that we do? Councillor Lawrence.
I'm satisfied as Scrutiny Committee that we've questioned this adequately tonight, and I would be totally satisfied that the community partnership would take aboard the questions being raised tonight and continue as they would.
Are we okay with that, listening what we heard tonight, that this notice of motion is not been ignored, but it will be addressed in a bigger forum, if that's okay with everybody?
I think yes, Chair, thank you. If that's what the committee agrees, I'm happy to do that as long as we keep a watching brief and get the information. Quite happy to have that to save duplication, Chair.
I think I've listened quite clearly, and I think when we taken on board what Henry has just spelled out, and I think we were all there, Derek, and he knows that we all turned up, and there were good points raised, and then they know what needs to be addressed. So I think taken board that we'll take this off the agenda, yeah? All right. The last item, we just quickly go through the works, program for the overview and scrutiny committee. Just quickly, with the next meeting, they're disappearing. All right, thank you very much, both of you. Right, just quickly, I don't know, there are some of the things that are in the progress of the working party that's going on. So is there anything that one feels that is missing or needs pushing or whatever needs to be done? So I'm open to debate just quickly, and if not, can write to me and then we can pick it up later on. Would it be better that way? Gives you a chance to review it. And I'm also conscious of the warm hub, yeah? And I have brought that with after that we need to pick that one up, Councillor Livesey. Are we okay with this? And then we got the Chief Executive and the Councillor Poole, who will be coming next meeting. Councillor Livesey.
Yeah, just to clarify that the Warm Hub stuff is being taken forward, but just to ask Lynn, I can't see the Arrears Working Party on this list of things. If somebody, maybe I'm blind, I just can't see it, but if someone could point it out to me, I'd be grateful.
I've not watched. I'll speak to Aftab, and when he gets back, and fortunately, we can't. We will rush for time. So, shall we accept the work program as it stands, and then if there is anything, give us a call or email, and then we'll pick it up. Okay. Can I just say to all the members to manage here the quiet day, and Lynn for everything. David, thank you very much. And then shall I call the end of the meeting? And thank you all for your participation. Thank you.